Season 2 had a good start, but in my opinion, it petered out. Too much gamer versus housewife drama, possible production interference to keep a certain faithful in the game, and most of the decisions from every single traitor. I'm sure many viewers had their own list of negatives. So going into Season 3, my first hope was that an ex-Big Brother player was not picked as a traitor. That hand has been played too many times before, and the US ones have not exactly been good at this, plus it's too predictable. Just to note, I'm not counting Survivor Suri in this, despite the fact she also did Big Brother. The second thing was that I have to shift my own expectations, that this is incredibly different to the type of celebrities that other countries have had, that things that happened before the game do matter, that if they dangle a carrot of friction between players beforehand, that might end up being a non-event during the whole game, that the setup to make good TV might not have the payoff, but something else entirely could. We had two levels. We started with Big Brother's Danielle not wanting to see Brittany and Tony being mentioned as a name people didn't want to see from Survivor, but that's just about game playing. On the other side of the coin, we had Gabby and Nikki saying they wouldn't say hi to Tom, and we found out later in the game that Chrishell is friends with Tom's ex. I won't get into any of that. In my head, I had divided everyone into different groups. The ones I had watched on something before, the ones I had heard of, and those I didn't even know they existed. Funnily enough, Ivar, this season's random Brit, is in the I didn't even know they existed category. He might come from a famous family, and his relationship might have been in the newspapers, according to him because I don't read them. So I would recognise his surname like Dylan's, but wouldn't have seen either of their faces or known their first name. 20 players stood outside the castle ready to get the game started, but before they could enter, we had our first twist. I do like a good twist. One of the masked assistants was a potential player. Shake Alan's hand if they want the masked player to join, then pick someone to be exiled from the castle. Boston Rob was revealed as the masked player. An opportunity for Jeremy or even Carolyn to take out Tony, for Danielle to get revenge on Brittany, or maybe someone else to get rid of Tom. What I was questioning is why would anyone do it? If Rob is as cutthroat as people say he is, would swapping him for someone similar like Tony or less dangerous like most of the others really be a good move to make? The edit was geared to look like Carolyn was the one who was considering it the most, often looking at Jeremy like she wanted the go-ahead to do so. With no one shaking Alan's hand, I was sure this wouldn't be the last time we saw Rob, so it came as no surprise that we saw him again at the end of episode 1. Rob was filed under the ones I had heard of, prior to me only recently just watching my first Survivor episode with Survivor 47, and before Suri, Parvati or Sandra entered the world of the Traitors, the only Survivor alumni I had ever heard of was Boston Rob. I don't even know how or why, but his name stuck with me because Boston is one of the few cities I've visited in the USA. Bob the drag queen, Carolyn and Danielle were picked as traitors. How intense was Tom after the traitor picks? He would freak me out so much that people would think I was a traitor because I would avoid looking at him. The production team knew what they were doing when they sat Tom and Chrishell next to each other. They had barely left the round table before Tom was sharing his suspicions of Chrishell with Robin, and then it just spread with Tony also thinking the same. Maybe it's a good thing for Chrishell there was no banishment vote in episode 1. Having seen UK season 3 do this boat mission, failing to pick up any money, at least in the US version they banked some money. Unfortunately, with Ian, Bob H, Dolores, Dorinda, Robin and Sam sacrificing themselves, they were candidates for murder. Bob the drag queen and Danielle had also volunteered to stay, and funnily enough sacrificed themselves on the same raft. There was already friction that would affect the game, so the fact that the first mission saw the majority of women volunteer to get off the boat could potentially cause further friction. Ivar wanted the women to sacrifice themselves, while Bob the drag queen was trying to get some men to come off the boat so it wasn't only women. With those on the boat not bothering to row to the last pontoon for money and ending up eating most of the food before the others got back, some people were not particularly happy about things. Faithfuls are so quick to jump on reactions to things, so while Chrishell had the early suspicions after the picks, Dorinda was the next suspect based on what happened after the mission. At the end of episode 1, we were clued in on the repercussions of Rob being exiled earlier in the episode, the twist being that Rob will enter the game as a traitor. In addition, there were 2 others joining. At the beginning of episode 2, we learnt the 2 additions were Derek and Wes, and they were Faithfuls. For someone who I had never seen before this year, I'm seeing a lot of Wes right now, as I'm also watching him appear on Worst Cooks in America, Heroes vs Villains. In the turret, there was some initial friction between Carolyn and Danielle about how to go about playing as a traitor. Gonna file that under things that have the potential to be an issue in the game. I was surprised about the choice to murder Dorinda because I thought she would have been up for banishment. I don't think there's enough for the traitors to pin it on Ivar, who was very eager to tell Tom he thought Dorinda was a traitor the previous night. Carolyn is making me laugh in her commentary, not knowing how to act when they're asking her things she shouldn't know. There were lots of talk about there possibly being a traitor amongst those who sacrificed themselves, even speculating that if one of the housewives were a traitor, they would get rid of another housewife to throw the scent off. Are we reading too much into last season, or is this just a general thought? Let's talk about Bob the drag queen and Danielle's tears. I'm not sure why they were laying it on that thick. Even Dorinda's fellow housewives weren't crying. If I was looking between them, I would think one of 2 ways. Bob and Danielle suspiciously overdoing it, or Dolores and Robin are a little too detached. Wells thought it wasn't a good move for the traitors to murder Dorinda, while Robin thought it was because it caused confusion. Wells's point was that Dorinda's name was going round for possible banishment. Robin used the point of if it was Danielle murdered, there wouldn't have been confusion. I agree with both of them to an extent. I don't think they should have murdered Dorinda for the same reason as Wells said, but they would have easily caused the same kind of confusion by getting rid of Ian or Dolores. The 3 new players who obviously spent all night hanging in the cages were unveiled to the others. The mission ended up just being about collecting enough coins to free them within the allotted time, so they can give someone a shield. Derek, Rob and Wes were immune from banishment and murder for that night. I had been waiting for a version to have one of the late or returning players enter as a traitor, though if I'd actually got through all the different versions, I may have seen it sooner than now. That first roundtable didn't seem like a foregone conclusion because of Dorinda's exit. It really did cause confusion, but not necessarily in another housewife's direction. There were too many people staying silent at the beginning of that first roundtable discussion. Whether it was just the edit or they actually were is unfortunately something we won't be privy to, unless they say so in a post-game interview. It was a little disappointing. I guess some either didn't have anybody they felt compelled to mention, or they were too scared of sticking out. Bob the drag queen started off the roundtable discussion bringing up Wells's name, which was also backed up by Robin. Before the roundtable, I was surprised that Wells's name kept popping up. The outside connection that already made this a bit awkward for Chriselle and Tom also had some influence on the game, as they kind of accused each other of being traitors. I say this once again, production knew what they were doing when they sat them next to each other. I mean, Chriselle's reason for voting for Tom was possibly a Cliff Notes version as to why there's tension between them. Danielle brought up the housewife theory, but that part of the conversation didn't go anywhere. Even though there really wasn't much going round, I was really surprised that Wells ended up being banished in a tight vote between him, Ivar and Robin. For me, it seemed other names were being talked about more before the roundtable, but those that voted for him seemed more convinced by it being Wells. While talking with Ian and Robin after the roundtable, Dylan shared his thoughts, his thinking that if Robin wasn't a traitor, then it was Bob the drag queen, because they both brought up Wells's name. Robin seemed a lot more receptive to this than when Jeremy said he thought one of the Bobs was a traitor. Derek told Danielle who he gave his shield to. With Rob also a traitor and knowing who Wes gave his to, it meant the traitors had the information they needed to execute their second murder with precision. When I first saw the 4 traitors together, my first thought was I wonder how quickly they will turn against each other and who would be the first one banished. It just didn't feel like this would be a good unit, especially from Rob's commentary and the discussions on who to murder. Knowing that discussions in the turret can take a while, I can envisage this particular meeting of the 4 taking longer than usual. I don't know how long it took them to decide on Ian, but at first I didn't think it was a good move to go for another housewife. In my opinion, it kind of kills the whole a housewife is a traitor theory, at least for a while. With Tony telling people at breakfast they might pin it on him because Ian voted for him, it would have helped plant a seed about someone who would have already been a suspect due to his appearance on Survivor. At least Ian lasted one more day than her son predicted she would. Why is it the traitors that sing their own praises about their acting are the ones that are actually not as good as they think they are? Danielle was talking too much, especially at breakfast, adding the tears from the previous breakfast, and I just didn't think Bob the Drag Queen and Danielle had long in this game. Dylan might have the correct intuition about Bob the Drag Queen being a traitor, but that intuition is not helping as much when one of the people he trusts the most is Danielle. I don't know how many amongst those he was talking to believe either Bob the Drag Queen or Robin are traitors. That effort in the mission has to be up there in the most disappointing showings. The fact no one would even go in first was the beginning of the end. A miserable rainy day to go with their miserable showing. No money was added and no shield was won. So we had Jeremy tell Carolyn and Bob the Drag Queen amongst others about his suspicions of Danielle, and Dylan in the company of Rob mentioned Bob the Drag Queen. With traitor names floating around this early, it was a question of whether the others would try to protect or use it as an advantage. What was evident here was that regardless of if you are talking to a faithful or traitor, you really need to be careful with who you're talking game to, because they might run to that person to let them know. Dylan just didn't know what he was up against going after Bob the Drag Queen and Robin. Some of Bob's defense was cracking me up. The part where he gave Dylan a drag name was the best. With Tony being the other name that was mentioned, it was Tony that ended up being banished, with one cutting comment aimed towards Rob, following what Rob had said at the round table. I think there were two key things that contributed to Tony's banishment: the preconceived notions that people had about how he played Survivor and how he was actually playing this show. I don't know if him playing the show differently would have helped. I think some would have come to the same conclusion at some point in the game. Maybe I should watch Tony's seasons on Survivor to understand it. We have an early in plain sight death list murder mission with the traitors needing to go into the wine cellar behind the bookcase and write 3 names on a list. Both Carolyn and Danielle look so sus when they are walking from room to room looking for the others. I was wondering, did Bob the Drag Queen want to be caught on purpose? Why did he speak so loudly when all the traitors were in the wine cellar? I agree that it's not a good idea to put a traitor in one of the coffins. The faithfuls always automatically think a traitor has put themselves on a death list, so why not serve them the 2 surviving faithfuls? Let's see who they actually picked and if Gabby heard or saw them behind the bookcase.